AITA for moving out of my mom's house and cutting ties with my family after they accused me of being selfish. I, 26F, have always been a people pleaser. I grew up in a small town, and my family is super close-knit, sometimes too close-knit for comfort. I have two older brothers, 30M and 28M, and while we've always had a pretty normal sibling relationship, my relationship with my mom, Carol, has always been complicated. Let me give you a little background on why my relationship with her is so strained. My mom is one of those people who always thinks she knows best. Growing up, I was constantly told what to do, what to wear, who to hang out with, and what career I should pursue. The idea of making my own decisions was something I never really learned until I moved away for college. Even then, she would constantly call, text, and even show up unannounced at my dorm to check up on me. It was suffocating. Despite everything, I always tried to be the good daughter. I would call her every week, listen to her complaints about how difficult life was, and try to comfort her. I would drop everything to help her with errands or take her to doctor appointments. It was draining, but I did it because she was my mom, and I felt obligated to be there for her. When I graduated and got my first full-time job, I decided it was finally time to move out. I found a place nearby in the city, and it felt like a huge step toward independence. But even then, it wasn't easy. My mom would still call me constantly, sending long messages about how I was being irresponsible for not visiting her enough. She would guilt-trip me for spending time with friends or focusing on my career instead of her. It was like I could never win. If I wasn't around enough, I was abandoning her. If I spent too much time with friends or focused on my job, she'd accuse me of neglecting my family responsibilities. Over the past few months, things came to a head. My mom had an accident and broke her leg while out shopping. She had to have surgery, and I knew she would need help with basic things like cooking and cleaning. I didn't hesitate to go to her house and help out, even though I had my own busy schedule. I stayed for about 2 weeks, taking time off work to help her recover. My brothers came to visit, but their visits were brief. They both have their own families and lives, so it seemed like they were only there for the bare minimum. During this time, my mom started making passive-aggressive comments about how I never really help out and how my brothers were much better at helping her. I tried to brush it off, but it hurt. I felt like no matter how much I did for her, it was never enough. I started to feel like I was being taken for granted. It wasn't just the physical work that was draining. It was the emotional toll of always being expected to drop everything and cater to her needs. One day, things took a dramatic turn. My mom asked me to help her with something, and I told her I needed to take a few hours for myself. I hadn't had any personal time in weeks, and I was feeling burned out. I said I would help her later in the day, but she immediately blew up at me. She said I was selfish and uncaring for not putting her needs first. She accused me of being like my brothers, who, according to her, didn't care about family anymore. That was the final straw for me. I told her that I was tired of being constantly criticized, guilt-tripped, and expected to drop everything for her. I told her I needed space and that I was leaving her house. She didn't take it well. She started crying, telling me I was abandoning her and that she was disappointed in me. It felt like all the years of emotional labor I had put into the relationship meant nothing. I left her house and went back to my apartment. For the next few days, my mom didn't reach out. I thought she might need some time to cool off, but then my brothers started calling. They both told me I was being ridiculous and overdramatic. They said I was being selfish for not helping her more, especially after she had been through such a traumatic experience. They both argued that she was in pain and needed me to be there, and that I was just throwing away years of family support for something that could have been resolved with a little more patience. The problem is, I'm the only one who's always been there for her. My brothers are busy with their own families, and while they're not bad people, they just don't do as much as I do. When they're around, they leave most of the responsibility to me, even though they've seen how exhausting it is. I'm tired of being the family caregiver when everyone else gets to live their life without constantly feeling guilty for not doing enough. After several days of back-and-forth calls and messages, I finally snapped and told my brothers I needed a break from the family. I told them I was moving out of the small town I grew up in and getting some space. I knew this would upset them, but I was at my breaking point. They tried to convince me I was being overdramatic and that I'd regret it, but I was firm in my decision. They said I was being selfish, just like our mom had said. But in the end, I felt like I was doing the right thing for myself. Since then, things have been pretty tense. My mom and brothers have barely reached out, and when they do, it's always with accusations of me being selfish. My mom's messages are filled with guilt trips, and my brothers haven't even tried to understand my side of things. I'm just tired of being the one who gets blamed for everything, and I feel like no matter what I do, it will never be enough for them. Now, I'm questioning whether I did the right thing. Maybe I'm being selfish for prioritizing my own well-being over my family. But at the same time, I feel like I've been putting everyone else's needs before mine for so long that I'm finally allowed to take care of myself. So, AITA for moving out of my mom's house and cutting ties with my family. Enjoyed the video? Then hit like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more amazing videos. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when a new video is out. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to let my brother move in with me after he lost his job. So, here's the situation. I, 28F, have a brother, Chris, 30M, who's always had a bit of a rocky road when it comes to his career and finances. Our parents have always been there for him, bailing him out whenever he got into a jam, but I've always been the one who stayed out of it. I worked hard to build my life up, and I don't like being responsible for other people's mistakes. This has caused a bit of tension in the family, especially with my parents who think I'm too hard on Chris. But that's not what this post is about. About 6 months ago, Chris lost his job. It wasn't a huge surprise. He'd been bouncing from job to job for a while, and he didn't exactly leave on the best terms with his previous employer. He didn't seem overly concerned about it, though, brushing it off with "I'll figure it out" attitude. Fast forward to today, and he's been unemployed for months, struggling to find anything that sticks. A couple of weeks ago, Chris called me, and after a lot of back and forth, he finally came out with it. He was asking if he could move in with me for a while because he couldn't afford rent anymore. I wasn't surprised, but I was definitely frustrated. I've always been a bit of a perfectionist, and I take pride in my independence. I've worked my ass off to get where I am, and the idea of someone, especially my brother, moving in and potentially disrupting the routine I've carefully built was something I wasn't keen on. I told him no. I explained that I simply didn't have the space, and even if I did, it just wouldn't work for me. I told him I was happy to help him out in other ways, like helping him job hunt, offering financial advice, or even letting him crash for a night or two if he really needed it. But long term, I wasn't comfortable with the idea of him living with me. Chris didn't take it well. He got upset, saying I was being selfish and that I didn't care about him. He reminded me that our parents would probably help him, but I told him that it wasn't my responsibility to step in for them, especially when they've enabled him for so long. We argued for a while, and I ended up hanging up on him because I couldn't handle the guilt tripping anymore. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. Over the next few days, he started calling and texting constantly, trying to guilt trip me into changing my mind. Our parents got involved, telling me that I was being too harsh and that Chris needed help right now. They told me I should just let him stay for a few months until he got back on his feet. I stood my ground. I told him that I loved Chris, but I wasn't willing to sacrifice my peace of mind just because he couldn't get his act together. Our parents didn't like that, and we've been at odds ever since. My mom even said that I was being a bad sister, and that if the roles were reversed, I'd expect him to help me out. Now, I feel like I'm the one being blamed for everything. Chris is still upset with me. Our parents think I'm cruel, and I'm feeling the pressure from all sides. I'm just trying to live my life the way I want to, without feeling responsible for fixing his problems. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder if I'm being too harsh. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother move in with me when he lost his job. Edit. Since I've gotten a lot of comments asking for more context, here's a bit more. 1. Chris has a history of making bad financial decisions. He's been fired from a few jobs now for things like being late, not following through on tasks, and generally being a bit irresponsible. Our parents have always stepped in to help him, whether it's paying his rent or covering his bills when he's between jobs. I've never been part of that cycle. 2. I have a small apartment that I worked hard to afford on my own. I live alone, and I'm very protective of my space and my privacy. I've never had to share my home with anyone, and the idea of doing so makes me anxious. 3. I've offered to help Chris in other ways, like looking over his resume, introducing him to people in my industry, and just offering emotional support. But he's refused to take any of my advice, saying that it's not about finding a job, it's about needing a place to stay right now. 4. I get that losing a job is tough, but I've been in situations where I've struggled financially too. I've always figured it out without burdening others, and I just don't think I should be expected to be the safety net for someone who's not taking responsibility for their own life. I hope this clears up some of the confusion. Thanks to everyone who's given me feedback. I really appreciate the different perspectives. AITA for refusing to let my sister move in with me after she burned bridges with everyone. I, 29M, have a sister, Emily, 27F, who I've always had a complicated relationship with. Growing up, she was the golden child, smart, popular, athletic, and seemingly had everything together. I, on the other hand, was always the quieter one, the bookish introvert. But despite our differences, I always loved my sister and tried to support her, even though she often overshadowed me in every way possible. It was just how it was, and I got used to it. Fast forward to our adult lives. Emily's perfect image started to crack. She graduated from college, got a decent job in a marketing firm, and seemed to have her life together at first. But then, a couple of years ago, she started making poor choices, especially with her relationships. Emily got involved with a guy, Josh, 28M, who I never liked. He had a history of being manipulative, but Emily was completely blinded by him. She made excuses for his behavior and pushed away anyone who tried to warn her about him, including me. I watched her spiral further as she became more dependent on him. It was clear to everyone that Josh had a hold on her. It wasn't just her romantic life that started to fall apart. Her career started to suffer too. She got into arguments at work, started missing deadlines, and eventually got fired. After that, Emily hit rock bottom. She broke up with Josh, but the damage had already been done. She started drinking more, staying out late, and making a string of poor decisions. A few months ago, she called me crying, asking if she could come live with me. She said she had no place to go, and no one else would take her in. To give some context, my wife, Megan, 30F, and I have a small, cozy house. We don't have a lot of space, and we've always been a little private. I love my sister, but I've also seen the way she tends to drain everyone around her. I was hesitant, but after thinking it over, I agreed on the condition that she try to get her life together, find a job, work on her mental health, and not drink excessively. I set those boundaries because I didn't want her to be a permanent burden on us, and I wanted her to take accountability for her actions. Emily moved in with us 2 months ago, and honestly, it's been a nightmare. She barely followed any of the rules I set for her. She didn't bother looking for a job, spent most of her time hanging out with people I didn't trust, and when she did go out, it was to party. Megan and I have had to step in multiple times to help her with things that she should have been doing on her own. For example, we helped her set up interviews for jobs she never showed up to. We even paid for therapy sessions for her when she promised she'd work on her issues. But she was either late to those appointments or didn't attend them at all. The worst part is the drinking. I can't count the number of times I've had to intervene when she was too drunk to even hold conversation. She would stay out all night, not answer her phone, and then come home in the morning with a vague excuse about where she'd been. Megan and I would have arguments about how to handle the situation, and I always felt stuck in the middle because I wanted to help her, but I didn't want to enable her bad behavior. Things came to a head last week when Emily had an absolute meltdown after I asked her again to find a job. She yelled at me for not supporting her and told me I was just like everyone else who abandoned her. It was the first time I saw her truly lose control, and I'll admit, it shook me. Megan and I sat down with her afterward, trying to calmly explain that we were only trying to help her get back on track, but Emily refused to listen. She accused me of being too controlling, of not letting her live her life, and of only caring about keeping things perfect at home. She said I was too focused on my own family and couldn't handle helping her anymore. After the argument, I was fed up. I had tried everything. I had bent over backward to be there for her, and in return, I was getting nothing but anger and excuses. I told her that maybe it was time for her to leave. I felt guilty for saying it, but I also realized that the longer she stayed, the worse it was getting. Megan agreed, but she was also hesitant to kick her out without a solid plan. I ended up saying that I wasn't comfortable with her living with us anymore, especially since she wasn't making an effort to improve. So, Emily moved out. She was furious with me, calling me a failure as a brother and accusing me of not caring about her. She even tried to get our parents involved, but my mom and dad didn't take her side. They agreed that Emily needed to get her act together, though they were upset with the way I handled it. They said that I could have been more supportive and patient, but I feel like I had been patient for long enough. Now, she's trying to reach out again, asking if she can come stay with us, but I'm resolute in my decision. I feel like I gave her every opportunity, and she squandered them all. I'm worried that if I let her back in, we'll be right back to square one, dealing with the same issues all over again. My friends and Megan support my decision, but I'm still feeling guilty. I don't want to be the brother who abandons his sister, but at the same time, I don't think I should have to sacrifice my peace of mind or my relationship with Megan to help someone who doesn't want to help themselves. AITA for refusing to let Emily move back in. AITA for not letting my sister use my house for her kids after they broke my things. So I, 29M, have a pretty simple life. I work in a tech job, and I live in a small but cozy house that I'm pretty proud of. I've always been careful with my things, and I've kept my space nice because I'm a bit of a neat freak. I have a few pieces of furniture and electronics that I've invested in because I like things to last. It's not a mansion or anything, but it's mine and I take care of it. My sister, 32F, let's call her Liz, has 2 kids, Tommy, 8, and Ella, 6. Liz and her husband, Ben, 34M, live in a house a bit farther out of town, and it's got some space, but it's older and honestly, it's not in the best shape. It's been a bit of a struggle for them financially, but they make it work. Liz and Ben are both working, but they often struggle to balance things and don't have as much time to spend with the kids, especially because their schedules are unpredictable. For the most part, Liz and I have always gotten along, but we've had our differences, mainly because I'm more organized than she is. For example, I'm very careful with how I keep my home and make sure to clean up after myself. Liz, on the other hand, has a tendency to be a bit chaotic. Her house can get messy, and when the kids are around, it's even worse. A couple of weeks ago, Liz and Ben had to go out of town for a wedding. They didn't invite me, which I didn't mind. Long story. They asked if I could watch the kids for a few days while they were away. I didn't mind at first because I love my niece and nephew, but I knew it would be a bit of a challenge. My house isn't exactly set up for kids, and I don't have a ton of toys or things for them to do. But since Liz asked, I said yes. The first day, everything went fine. We played some games, had lunch, and the kids seemed to adjust. But then, things took a turn. Tommy and Ella started fighting over toys, and when I told them to stop, they didn't listen. They ran around the house, bumping into things and knocking over a vase that had been passed down from my grandmother. I was pretty upset, but I tried to stay calm. I explained to them that they needed to be careful, and I cleaned up the mess. The next day, they spilled juice on my couch. I had just bought the couch 6 months ago, and it was the most expensive piece of furniture I'd ever bought. I was furious, but I didn't want to upset the kids, so I try not to show it too much. I cleaned it up and told them that they had to be more careful. They promised to be more careful, but within an hour, they managed to break my TV remote. At this point, I was really starting to lose my patience, but I didn't want to go off on them. I felt like I had to keep it together, especially because Liz was trusting me to take care of them. The next day, things got even worse. I had just finished a long work day, and when I walked into the living room, I saw Tommy and Ella had somehow managed to get into my collection of board games. They hadn't just taken them out to play. They had opened the boxes and scattered the pieces everywhere. I spent hours trying to find all the pieces, but I couldn't find everything. Some of my games were missing pieces that were important for gameplay, and I knew they were ruined. I was starting to feel really frustrated at this point. That night, I texted Liz to let her know what had happened. I wasn't looking for sympathy or anything. I just wanted her to know so she could talk to the kids when they came back. Liz responded by saying that it was just stuff and that kids are messy, and I should expect it when I agree to watch them. She also told me that I was being dramatic and that the kids didn't mean to break my things. Honestly, that pissed me off. She didn't even seem to understand how important those things were to me, and it felt like she wasn't taking my concerns seriously. By the end of their stay, I was completely drained. I was exhausted from trying to keep the kids entertained and from dealing with the damage they caused. I know kids can be messy, but I didn't feel like Liz was acknowledging the extent of the damage. I didn't want to make a huge deal out of it, so I didn't yell at the kids, but I started to feel like my kindness was being taken advantage of. When Liz and Ben came back from the wedding, they picked up the kids, and I tried to keep things polite. But Liz seemed upset when I mentioned that there had been some issues while they were gone. I told her that I was glad to help, but that I was a little frustrated with how things went. She got defensive and said that I shouldn't expect everything to be perfect when I agreed to watch the kids. She said that she was sorry for the mess, but that I needed to learn to be more patient with them. I didn't want to keep arguing, but at that moment, I felt like I was being taken for granted. I told her that I wasn't sure I would be able to watch the kids for her again unless she made some changes to how she approached the situation. I told her that I didn't mind helping out, but I needed her to be more considerate of my things and to take more responsibility when things went wrong. Liz got upset, and Ben seemed to agree with her, saying that I was being unreasonable. They both left without much more discussion. Now Liz is angry with me and hasn't spoken to me in a week. She's telling our parents that I'm being too sensitive and needlessly dramatic. I'm starting to feel guilty for saying anything, but at the same time, I feel like I was just trying to set some boundaries. So, AITA for not letting my sister use my house for her kids again after they broke my things. AITA for not letting my best friend bring her boyfriend to my family vacation. I, 29F, have been friends with Lila, 28F, for about 10 years. We've always been really close, and we share a lot of common interests. We both love hiking, camping, and just spending time outdoors. Over the years, we've had many weekend trips and vacations together, and they've always been some of the best times of my life. Every year, my family rents a cabin in the mountains for a week-long vacation. It's become a tradition, and everyone in my family, my parents, 2 younger brothers, and their wives, looks forward to it. We do a lot of outdoor activities like hiking, fishing, and grilling out, but we also make time for movie nights, board games, and just relaxing in the cabin. It's always a great bonding experience, and my family is very close-knit. There's always laughter, good food, and lots of love. This year, I was really excited about the trip. We had already reserved the cabin months ago, and I've been looking forward to spending some time away from the hustle and bustle of work and life. I casually mentioned the trip to Lila, and she was really excited about it too. She said she would love to join, and I was more than happy to invite her, as she's always been like a sister to me. However, a few weeks before the trip, Lila told me that her boyfriend, Ben, 30M, had expressed interest in coming along as well. She said he would love to experience the trip with her and that they could really use a getaway. At first, I was a little taken aback because while I've met Ben a few times, I've never spent extended time with him, and I was unsure about how he'd mesh with my family. Lila and Ben have been dating for about 6 months, and I know she's serious about him. But I also know she's had a history of bringing her boyfriends on trips that didn't always go well. Some of the relationships were short-lived, and things got awkward when she brought them around for extended family time. I explained to Lila that this trip was something really special to me. My family has always been super close, and we've never really had outsiders on these vacations. I told her that I wasn't sure how my family would feel about having her boyfriend there, since it was a family tradition, and we usually keep it just to the immediate family. She seemed disappointed, but said she understood. She told me she would respect my decision either way. A few days later, she called me again and said Ben was really looking forward to meeting everyone and that he would love to join. She promised he would be respectful and wouldn't disrupt the family dynamic. She mentioned that Ben was great with people, and she felt it would be good for him to bond with my family, as she saw him as a long-term partner. I was feeling pressured at this point, but I still wasn't sure. I told her I needed some time to think about it, because deep down I wasn't comfortable with it. I talked to my family about it, and to my surprise, everyone was pretty adamant about keeping it a family-only trip. My parents said that they felt this was a time for us to bond as a family, and that adding someone new, especially someone we didn't know very well, would change the dynamic. My brothers both agreed, saying they weren't sure how they'd feel about spending a week in close quarters with someone they didn't know that well. They were supportive of Lila, but they also thought it would be awkward if her boyfriend was there. After thinking it over for a couple of days, I called Lila and explained my decision. I told her that I wasn't comfortable with her bringing Ben along, especially since this was a family vacation. I said I really hoped she understood that it wasn't personal, but it was just a tradition for us, and it wouldn't feel the same if we invited someone who wasn't part of the family yet. Lila was really upset. She told me that she had been looking forward to introducing Ben to my family, and she thought it would be a great opportunity for them to bond. She said she didn't understand why I couldn't just make an exception for her boyfriend. She reminded me of how supportive she had been of my relationships in the past, and she thought I was being unfair. She also mentioned that she'd never asked me to go on a trip with just her and her boyfriend, so why was I so opposed to having him come with us? I tried to explain that it wasn't about her or Ben specifically, but about maintaining the family dynamic that had been built over the years. I told her I was worried that adding a new person into the mix would create tension or make everyone feel uncomfortable, especially if things didn't work out between her and Ben down the line. I didn't want to be responsible for making the trip awkward or putting her in an uncomfortable position if the relationship didn't last. She didn't take it well. She told me that she felt betrayed, as if I was choosing my family over her, and that she didn't think I valued our friendship. She said I was being selfish and that I wasn't being a good friend. She said that she had always supported me, and now I was refusing to support her when she was trying to include her boyfriend in something important to her. I tried to calm her down, but she said she needed space and hung up on me. Since then, we've barely spoken. She sent me a couple of passive-aggressive texts saying things like, "Enjoy your family vacation," and "Hope you have fun without me." I feel like she's shutting me out, and I'm torn. I've always been there for Lila, but I also feel like I need to protect the dynamics of my family's trip, which has always been a sacred time for us to bond. I'm starting to feel guilty, like maybe I should have just made an exception for her and let Ben come. But at the same time, I don't know if it would have been a good idea for someone who's not part of the family to come on such an intimate, long-standing tradition. So, AITA for not letting my best friend bring her boyfriend to my family vacation. AITA for not inviting my best friend to my birthday party after she criticized my career choice. I, 27F, have been best friends with Sarah, 28F, for over a decade. We met in high school, and we've always been there for each other. We've gone through so many stages of life together: school, breakups, moves, job changes, you name it. We've always been extremely close. That being said, recently, things between us have started to feel a little off. I'm not sure if I'm just overthinking it, but it's been bothering me for a while, and I'm now wondering if I'm in the wrong. So here's the backstory. For the past 3 years, I've been working as a freelance graphic designer. It started as a side hustle during college, but after graduating, I made the leap to full-time freelance work. I won't lie, it was tough in the beginning. There were months where I barely scraped by, and I had to work incredibly hard to establish a reputation. But I've been at it long enough now that I'm comfortable and my business is growing steadily. I'm proud of what I've built, and I genuinely enjoy what I do. Sarah, on the other hand, has always been more conventional. She has a stable 9 to 5 job in marketing, and she's made it clear that she values job security and predictability. Whenever we talk about our careers, she's always been supportive, or so I thought. We've had a few debates here and there about the pros and cons of freelancing versus a regular job, but it never seemed like a big deal. Until recently. A couple of months ago, we had a conversation that really threw me off. It started innocently enough. I was telling her about a big project I was working on, and I was excited because it had the potential to be a great portfolio piece. But instead of congratulating me or showing excitement, Sarah made a comment that felt kind of harsh. She said, "I just don't get it. You're not really going to have a future in freelancing, are you? I mean, how long can you keep this up? It's not exactly a real job, you know? You should really think about getting something stable. Otherwise, you'll just end up struggling forever." I was taken aback. I've never seen Sarah as someone who would say something like that. It stung because I've worked incredibly hard to get to where I am, and I've made a career out of something I'm passionate about. Freelancing might not be the traditional career path, but it's been working for me, and I'm proud of it. I try to brush it off and laugh it off at first, but the comment lingered with me for days. Over the next few weeks, every time I talked about work, she'd make similar comments. Are you sure you're not just wasting time? Why not just go for something more secure? You're so talented, but you need to think long-term. Each time she said something like this, it felt like a jab. It started to feel less like a friendly conversation and more like criticism. Eventually, I stopped talking about work altogether when we hung out because I didn't want to hear any more of her opinions. Then, my birthday came around. It's always been a big deal for me. I love celebrating with friends and family. I started planning my party about a month in advance. I was looking forward to it because, after a few tough years, I felt like things were finally falling into place, and I wanted to celebrate with the people who have supported me along the way. I created a guest list, and Sarah was obviously on it. But as the date got closer, I started thinking about the last few months and her comments about my career. I don't know why, but something about it just kept bothering me. I couldn't help but feel that if she didn't believe in what I was doing or respect my choices, maybe she didn't deserve to be part of my celebration. So, about a week before the party, I made a decision. I didn't invite Sarah. I didn't tell her why. I just said that I was keeping the guest list smaller this year and that I was sorry, but I wouldn't be able to have her over this time. It felt weird, but also kind of freeing. I knew it was a big decision, but I convinced myself it was justified. She hadn't been supportive of me recently, and I didn't want to have someone at my birthday who was making me feel small. The day of the party came, and everything went really well. I had a great time with the friends who were there, and I honestly felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But then, Sarah found out through mutual friends that she wasn't invited, and she was upset. She texted me and asked why she hadn't been included. At first, I just ignored it. I didn't feel like explaining myself, but after a few more messages, I eventually caved and told her the truth, that I didn't feel like she was being supportive of my career choices lately, and that it was hurtful. I told her I didn't want to have someone at my party who was constantly making me feel like I wasn't doing enough. She was devastated. She responded with a very long message, saying that I was overreacting and that she was just concerned about my future. She said she never meant to make me feel bad, and she was just trying to give me advice. She even said that I was acting immature and overly sensitive for letting a few comments ruin our friendship. Since then, we've barely spoken. I feel conflicted because I've always considered Sarah my best friend, but her lack of support has made me question whether I really want someone like that in my life. It's not like she was just giving me constructive criticism. It felt like she was belittling my career and questioning my choices. I thought best friends should be there for each other, even if they don't always understand or agree with everything. So, AITA for not inviting Sarah to my birthday party because of her constant criticism of my career. Edit. I know a lot of people are asking about whether I've talked to Sarah about how her comments made me feel, and the answer is yes. I've tried to explain to her multiple times how her comments have hurt me, but she always brushes it off as just trying to help or says I'm being too sensitive. It feels like she doesn't take my feelings seriously, and that's been a big part of why I've distanced myself. Also, I'm not expecting everyone to support my freelancing career, but I do think there's a way to be constructive without being dismissive of someone's choices. I'm open to hearing other perspectives, but I also feel like I've done what I can to maintain our friendship. AITA for telling my best friend that I don't want to be her bridesmaid anymore. I, 29F, have been best friends with Sarah, 30F, for about 12 years. We've been through everything together. High school, college, relationships, and all the ups and downs of life. We were inseparable, or at least I thought we were. A few months ago, Sarah got engaged to Tom, 32M, and while I was genuinely happy for her at first, everything changed when she started planning the wedding. Sarah has always been a bit of a perfectionist, but I never thought it would get to this level. From the moment she got engaged, she began obsessively planning every detail of the wedding. She wanted everything to be perfect, which I understood. Her wedding day was going to be a huge event for her. But as the months passed, her behavior became more controlling and, frankly, exhausting. At first, it was small things. She asked me to help with picking out the wedding dress, which I did with enthusiasm. But then she started micromanaging every little decision. She'd send me multiple texts a day about color schemes, seating arrangements, and the smallest details, even asking for my opinion on things that seemed trivial to me. I tried to be supportive, but I was starting to feel overwhelmed. Still, I kept it to myself because I knew this was an important time for her. Then, the first big issue came up when Sarah asked me to be her maid of honor. I was honored, of course, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much work it would entail. She asked me to attend every wedding-related event, including all of the dress fittings, bridal showers, and planning meetings. She also made it clear that I would need to help with organizing everything and ensuring that her vision came to life. I agreed, knowing she was my best friend, and I wanted to be there for her, even if it meant sacrificing some of my time. As the wedding date approached, things only got worse. Sarah began demanding my time in ways that felt unreasonable. She insisted on me being available whenever she needed me, even if it meant rearranging my work schedule or canceling plans with other friends. I missed birthdays, family gatherings, and even a few important events because Sarah kept asking me to help her with the wedding. It wasn't just the time, it was the way she started treating me. She was always short with me, acting as if I was the one causing delays or problems. The breaking point came when Sarah asked me to go with her to a luxury bridal store an hour away to try on wedding dresses again, despite the fact that we had already been there once before. I had work that day, and I told her I couldn't make it. Instead of being understanding, she got furious. She accused me of not caring about her wedding, of being a bad best friend, and of prioritizing work over her. She even sent me a long text message later saying that I was letting her down when she needed me the most. I tried to explain that I had work commitments and that I didn't mean to disappoint her, but she didn't want to hear it. She kept saying that I should be willing to drop everything for her wedding because it was the most important day of her life. It felt like everything had to revolve around her, and I started to feel like I was just a pawn in her wedding fantasy. Over the next few weeks, I continued to try to be supportive, but it felt like everything I did wasn't enough. Sarah kept raising her expectations, adding new tasks for me to do, and treating me as though I was a servant rather than a friend. She even started comparing me to some of her other bridesmaids, saying things like, I don't have to worry about bridesmaid A or bridesmaid B because they're so on top of things, unlike you. I felt like I couldn't do anything right. Finally, one evening, after another long and frustrating phone call in which she criticized me for not helping enough with wedding prep, I snapped. I told her that I couldn't keep being her maid of honor, that I felt like I was being treated like an employee rather than a friend. I told her that I loved her, but I didn't think I could continue with the role of being her maid of honor given how she was treating me. I also told her that I needed some space to focus on my own life because I felt like her wedding had consumed everything. She was immediately hurt, and I could tell that she was angry, but she didn't say much during our conversation. The next day, I got a long text from her saying that I was selfish and that I was letting her down. She said that no one else could fulfill the role of maid of honor the way I could, and that if I left, it would ruin her wedding. She said that I was putting myself first instead of putting her first when it was the most important day of her life. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not caring about her wedding, but that I couldn't continue to put all of my energy into her event when it was starting to negatively affect my mental health. I told her that I still wanted to be part of the wedding, but I just didn't want the pressure of being the maid of honor anymore. Sarah didn't respond to my message for several days. When she did, she told me that she didn't want someone like me in her wedding anymore and that I had ruined everything. She said she couldn't understand why I would make this about me, especially when she had done so much to accommodate my schedule and make sure I was included in everything. She said she didn't know if we could ever be as close as we used to be, and that hurt more than anything. Now, I feel like I've lost my best friend. I've been second-guessing myself, wondering if I overreacted. I know weddings are stressful, but I never expected to feel like I was being emotionally manipulated just because I couldn't handle the pressure anymore. On the other hand, I know I should have communicated better and not let it get to the point where I had to make such a drastic decision. AITA for stepping down as her maid of honor and telling her I couldn't handle the pressure anymore. AITA for telling my best friend I no longer want to be her maid of honor after she kept canceling our plans. So I, 29F, have a best friend, Megan, 30F, who I've known since we were in middle school. We've always been really close, like the kind of friends who tell each other everything, get together for movie nights, and make each other laugh when no one else gets our jokes. We've been through a lot together. I always thought our friendship was solid. A few months ago, Megan got engaged to her boyfriend, Mark, 32M, and of course, I was so excited for her. She asked me to be her maid of honor, which I was honored by. I immediately said yes, and we started talking about the wedding and all the plans. We've had some ups and downs with the planning, mostly around her family drama. But overall, I was really happy to be part of her big day and to help make it special for her. Here's where things started to go downhill, though. Megan and I used to spend a lot of time together, going to coffee shops, doing weekend trips, and just hanging out. But after the engagement, she started getting really busy with wedding planning, which I totally understood. I didn't expect her to drop everything, but I did expect that we'd still find time for our regular hangouts. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. At first, I thought it was just wedding stress. Everyone warned me that wedding planning could be overwhelming, so I didn't think too much of it. But after a few weeks, I started noticing a pattern. Megan would cancel plans at the last minute, sometimes giving me just a few hours' notice. It started off small. She'd cancel a coffee date because she had to go do something for the wedding. I was understanding at first, but it kept happening more and more. She started rescheduling plans multiple times, and I was starting to feel like she was treating me as an afterthought. One time, we had plans to go to a museum that she knew I'd been wanting to visit for months. We'd talked about it for weeks, and I had looked forward to it. The day of, she texted me in the morning saying she had suddenly remembered a meeting with a vendor and couldn't make it. I was disappointed, but didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I replied that we could reschedule. She promised we'd do it next weekend. Guess what? Next weekend came, and the same thing happened. She texted me saying she had forgotten about a dress fitting and had to cancel again. I felt like she was brushing me off, and honestly, I was getting frustrated. I didn't want to seem like a burden, so I kept trying to give her space, but it was hard to ignore how little effort she seemed to be putting into our friendship. I understood she was busy, but this felt different. I began to feel like I was just an accessory to her wedding plans, not someone she actually cared about anymore. The breaking point came about a month ago. We had plans to spend the whole weekend together. We had booked a spa day, dinner in a nice restaurant, and planned a movie night, just like old times. I was so excited because I hadn't seen her in over a month, and I felt like we both needed that time. We were supposed to meet up on Friday evening, but that morning she texted me saying she had to drop everything for a last-minute meeting with the wedding planner. She apologized and asked if we could reschedule for Saturday. I told her that was fine, but I was honestly pretty upset. Saturday came, and by noon, I still hadn't heard from her. I texted her asking if we were still on, and she replied a few hours later, saying she was too tired to go out and needed a day to rest. That was it. No apology for canceling on me again, no explanation for the constant rescheduling. I just felt like I was no longer a priority in her life. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. By that point, I was really hurt. It wasn't just about the canceled plans. It was about the lack of effort and consideration. We had been through so much together over the years, and now it felt like she couldn't be bothered. I texted her one last message, telling her that I felt like she was pushing me away and that I didn't know how to keep up with this one-sided friendship anymore. I told her that it hurt to be treated this way, especially when I had been there for her through everything. She called me later that night, and we talked. She said she had been overwhelmed with the wedding and everything that was going on, but I wasn't really buying it anymore. She apologized and promised things would get better. But in my gut, I knew something was off. I told her I needed some time to think about our friendship because I wasn't sure I could keep being the maid of honor if she couldn't even find time for me. After a few days of thinking, I came to the decision that I couldn't be her maid of honor anymore. I felt like the role was supposed to be about supporting her and being there for her during one of the most important times in her life, but I wasn't feeling supported or valued at all. I texted her and told her that I was stepping down as her maid of honor. I told her that I still wanted to be part of her wedding in some capacity, but that I couldn't continue to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Megan was devastated. She said she couldn't believe I was backing out of the role, and she started crying on the phone when we talked. She told me I was being unreasonable and that I should understand how stressful the wedding planning was. She said I was acting like everything was about me and that I needed to be more supportive. But honestly, I felt like I had been supportive for months, and I was the one who needed support. Now, our friendship is in a weird place. Megan's upset with me for stepping down as her maid of honor, and some of our mutual friends are upset with me too. They say I should have been more understanding of the stress she's under and that I should have just stuck it out. But I feel like I've been clear with her about how her actions were affecting me, and she still didn't make an effort. I feel like she only cares about the wedding and not about our friendship. So, AITA for telling my best friend I no longer want to be her maid of honor after she kept canceling our plans. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to lend my car to my sister after she lied to me. I, 27F, have a younger sister, Emma, 24F, who's always had a bit of a tendency to be irresponsible. She's smart, and I love her to pieces, but she has a knack for making impulsive decisions and not thinking things through. Growing up, she was the one who'd skip class, get in trouble with the law, or find herself in sticky situations that required a lot of cleanup. I, on the other hand, have always been a bit of a rule follower, organized, and I'm careful with my decisions. My family and I have always tried to support Emma, but we've also had to set boundaries because her actions often led to extra stress for everyone involved. A few months ago, Emma hit a major financial snag. She had just moved into a new apartment, which, in hindsight, was way above her means. She was struggling to pay rent, had to cut back on expenses, and had already racked up a significant amount of debt. She came to me for advice and support, which I was more than willing to offer. I told her that she needed to reevaluate her living situation and maybe downsize or find a roommate to share the costs, but she wasn't too keen on that idea. I was frustrated, but still tried to help her find ways to budget and cut unnecessary spending. Then, a couple of weeks ago, Emma called me in a panic. She told me that her car had broken down and that it would be too expensive to fix. She said the mechanic quoted her a ridiculous price, and she was unsure if it was worth it. Emma said she didn't have enough money to buy a new car, and she needed a vehicle to get to work, but public transportation wasn't an option because her job was located in a rural area without bus service. She asked if I could lend her my car for a couple of weeks while she figured out her finances. I was taken aback. I've had my car for several years, and while it's not a brand new model, it's in great condition and I rely on it for work and personal use. I immediately told her that I wasn't comfortable lending it to her because I didn't want to risk anything happening to it. I also knew that she had a history of being irresponsible, and the thought of her driving my car without fully understanding the consequences made me nervous. Emma didn't take my refusal well. She said I was being selfish and unsympathetic. She claimed that I had always been the responsible one and that I was holding it against her. She said she wasn't asking for a huge favor, just to borrow the car for a little while. She promised she would take care of it and that nothing would happen to it. I told her that while I appreciated her promises, I couldn't take the risk. I asked her to explore other options, like borrowing a car from a friend or looking into affordable rental cars for a short period. The situation escalated the next day. Emma sent me a long text accusing me of not being there for her when she needed me the most. She said I had everything and that I was being petty about something so small. She told me I didn't understand what it was like to struggle and that I was just too busy being perfect to help my own sister out. I felt guilty and hurt by her words, but I stuck to my decision. I knew it wasn't about the car, it was about her pattern of irresponsible behavior, and I didn't want to enable it. A few days later, Emma called me again, but this time she had a different approach. She told me that she had figured something out and that she had found a solution. She said she was going to borrow a car from a friend for a couple of weeks, and everything would be fine. She thanked me for my support and said I didn't need to worry about it anymore. I was relieved at first, but then a week later, I saw something that made my stomach drop. I was driving to work when I noticed Emma's car parked outside her apartment. Only, it wasn't her car. It was a car that looked identical to mine. I instantly felt a wave of panic and confusion. I parked nearby and waited for a while, hoping I had misinterpreted the situation. But when Emma came outside, she got in the car I had just seen and drove off. I was furious. I immediately called her, and she picked up after a couple of rings. I asked her point blank, "Why is my car parked outside your apartment?" She was caught off guard and hesitated before finally admitting that she had taken my car without asking. She said she didn't think it would be a big deal because it was just temporary. She promised that she would return it the next day, and she claimed that she only used it to get to work. At that point, I was livid. I told her that she had lied to me and violated my trust. She had assured me she was borrowing a friend's car, but she had taken mine without permission. She apologized repeatedly, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I told her to bring the car back immediately. When she showed up with it a few hours later, I told her I needed some space and that I didn't want to speak to her for a while. I didn't expect her to be this reckless. I had always tried to be understanding, but this was crossing a line. I've always tried to be there for Emma, but her constant disregard for my boundaries and the way she manipulates situations to get what she wants has pushed me to my breaking point. Since then, our relationship has been strained. Emma has sent me several texts apologizing and claiming that she didn't think it would be a big deal. She says she made a mistake and that she's learned her lesson. But I'm still hurt. I've always been there for her, but this time, I feel like she took advantage of my trust. I don't know if I can ever fully trust her again, and I'm not sure how to move forward with our relationship. I've talked to a few friends about the situation, and they've all told me I'm in the right for standing my ground. But some family members have said I should just let it go and forgive her because family is family. I'm conflicted because I want to maintain a relationship with my sister, but I also don't want to enable her behavior or allow her to walk all over me. So, AITA for refusing to lend my car to my sister after she lied to me? AITA for refusing to attend my friend's wedding after she insulted my job? So, here's the situation. I, 30F, have been best friends with Emma, 30F, for over 15 years. We've gone through everything together. High school drama, college struggles, bad relationships, you name it. We're the kind of friends who share everything and are always there for each other. Or at least, that's how it used to be. A few months ago, Emma got engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Greg. They've been together for about 6 years, and while I was happy for her, I had a feeling that this wedding was going to change things. I've always been the practical one in our friend group. I don't come from money, and I've always worked really hard to get by. I'm a nurse, which I love doing, but it's not exactly a glamorous job. It's long hours, physically and emotionally draining, and I don't always get paid as much as I'd like. I've always been open with my friends about this, including Emma, and we've always had respectful conversations about work and life in general. The first sign something was off came when Emma started talking about her wedding plans. She wanted a big, lavish celebration, an expensive venue, designer dresses, and a huge guest list. At first, I was happy to listen and help her plan. But as time went on, I noticed that Emma kept talking about the wedding in a way that made me feel uncomfortable. She'd frequently mention how much money everything was going to cost and how she was really splurging to make it perfect. It wasn't just about the wedding day itself. It was as if she was trying to show off how much money she was spending, as if it was a symbol of success. The more she talked about it, the more I started to feel left out. Don't get me wrong, I get that weddings are a big deal, and I know people want to celebrate their special day in style, but it felt like she was expecting all of us to get on board with this extravagant dream. For example, she sent out a save the date that was on a fancy, thick card that probably cost more than my entire monthly grocery bill. She also made a point of telling me how much the bridesmaids' dresses were going to cost. I was fine with the idea of contributing to the wedding. I always figured I'd help her out, but when she mentioned the dresses would be $500, I was taken aback. I'm not trying to sound cheap, but $500 is a lot for a dress I'll only wear once. I politely told her that I didn't think I could afford the dress. Emma didn't take it well. She made a snide comment about how she thought I'd be more invested in her wedding, especially since we've been friends for so long. She also implied that if I couldn't afford the dress, I might not be able to afford attending the wedding at all. I felt terrible. I've always tried to be there for Emma, and now she was making me feel guilty for not being able to keep up with her high-budget expectations. After that, things started to snowball. Whenever we'd talk, Emma would bring up how much she was spending on the wedding, as if it was a competition. She'd talk about how Greg's family was paying for this or how her parents were covering that. She'd mentioned that her coworkers were all going to be attending and how she was making sure everything was top tier for them. The more she talked, the more I realized that my life, my job, and my income weren't aligning with her expectations. Emma made several comments about how real professionals had good-paying jobs, implying that the work I do wasn't valuable enough to warrant a big spender lifestyle. She even said, "It's just a little disappointing that my best friend is stuck in a job that doesn't even pay enough for a nice dress." That one stung. I've always been proud of my work as a nurse. Sure, it's hard, but it's meaningful, and it pays the bills. I work in a hospital, often with people in their most vulnerable moments. And yes, it's not as glamorous as being an executive or working in finance, but it's a job that matters. When Emma made that comment, I was beyond hurt. At that point, I realized that I was being treated like my job wasn't good enough for her wedding. But I brushed it off. After all, Emma was going through a lot with wedding planning, and maybe she was just stressed. I wanted to be supportive and didn't want to add to her stress. But then, a few weeks later, something happened that made me seriously reconsider attending her wedding. Emma invited me to her bridal shower, and I was excited to attend. I was prepared to bring a thoughtful gift and support her as best as I could. But the invitation included a suggested gift list. The list was filled with expensive items, ranging from designer kitchenware to a luxury vacation fund. The total cost of all the suggested gifts was astronomical. I was floored. It felt like Emma was expecting everyone to buy extravagant gifts to prove how much they cared about her. I didn't know how to respond. I had never been to a bridal shower with a price list attached, and I was put off by the idea of being told how much I needed to spend. I confided in a couple of other friends, and they all felt the same way. One of them, who is also friends with Emma, told me that she had been feeling similarly excluded from the wedding plans but didn't know how to address it either. I realized that this wasn't just about me. Emma's behavior had been alienating a lot of her close friends, but no one was willing to speak up. I took a step back. After a lot of internal deliberation, I made the decision to skip the wedding altogether. I knew it would hurt Emma, but I also knew I couldn't be part of a celebration that made me feel so small. I sent her a text explaining that I wouldn't be able to attend the wedding because I felt like our values were no longer aligned, and I couldn't be part of a celebration that felt more about status and money than about friendship. Emma was devastated. She sent me a long message saying I was being overly sensitive and that I should just be happy for her and her big day. She said she understood I didn't have a lot of money, but that didn't mean I should be so bitter about it. She also said I was being selfish by not attending her wedding when she had always supported me. Now, things are incredibly tense between us. She hasn't spoken to me since I sent that message, and our mutual friends are split. Some think I made the right decision, while others think I should have sucked it up and gone for the sake of the friendship. I feel like I've lost a friend over something that wasn't my fault, but at the same time, I don't want to pretend like everything is fine when it clearly isn't. So, AITA for refusing to attend my friend's wedding after she insulted my job and treated me like my career wasn't good enough. AITA for telling my friend I won't babysit her kids anymore after she keeps canceling plans at the last minute. I, 30F, have a close friend, Lisa, 31F, who I've known since college. Over the years, we've always been there for each other. We've gone through a lot together, from breakups and job changes to big life milestones. Lisa has 2 kids, Sophia, 5F, and Ethan, 3M, both of whom are adorable, but I've never been the type who was super into kids. I've always been more of a I love them from a distance person, but I've done my best to support Lisa as a friend, especially since she's a single mom and has no other family nearby. At the beginning of last year, Lisa asked me if I could occasionally babysit her kids. She said she needed some time for herself. She was feeling overwhelmed, and with her job and everything else going on in her life, she wanted to have some time to recharge. I agreed to help her out. I'm not exactly a natural babysitter, but I figured I could manage a few hours every couple of weeks. I'm a reliable person, and I've always made it a point to show up when I commit to something, so I didn't think it would be a big deal. At first, things were fine. I babysat on weekends, sometimes in the evenings when she had plans with friends or needed to work late. It wasn't always easy, but I made an effort. I took the kids to the park, played with them, and even learned how to make them dinner, despite not being a cook. Lisa would come home grateful and relaxed, and I'd feel like I'd done something helpful. But over time, things started to change. Lisa began to ask for more frequent babysitting sessions, often at the last minute. I would be in the middle of something, working, catching up with other friends, or just having a quiet weekend, and she'd text me asking if I could watch the kids that afternoon or evening. Sometimes, I'd get a message an hour before she needed me, or even worse, when I was already committed to something else. I'd say no or offer a different time, and she'd get frustrated. She'd start texting things like, "I really need you," or "I don't know who else to ask." It started to feel like a lot of pressure. I'll admit, I let it slide for a while because I understood she was going through a tough time. But then things escalated. She started canceling on me last minute. I'd make plans to babysit, rearrange my schedule, and then she'd cancel a few hours before I was supposed to watch the kids. Sometimes she'd say that something came up. Other times she'd say she wasn't feeling well or that the kids were sick. I completely understand that things happen, but it happened so often that I started to get frustrated. It was affecting my time, and I felt like I was being used as a backup option for her. There was no consistency, and I never knew whether or not I'd be needed until the very last minute. I started to feel like I was always on call. Every time I said yes to watching the kids, I'd give up other plans I had, only for Lisa to cancel. After the third time in a month that she canceled on me, I texted her and said that I couldn't keep doing this. I told her that I couldn't keep rearranging my life to babysit at the last minute, especially when she kept canceling. I explained that I still wanted to help out, but I needed her to be more considerate of my time. I told her I needed more notice if she wanted me to babysit, and I needed her to stop canceling on me so often. Lisa was upset. She texted me saying that she had no one else to rely on, that she was a single mom, and that I was being selfish for not helping her out when she needed it most. She said that if I truly cared about her, I'd be more flexible and understanding of her situation. She told me that I was making her feel guilty for asking for help and that I was letting her down. She even mentioned that I had no idea what it was like to be a single mom, which, to be fair, I don't, but I felt like it wasn't fair for her to make that comparison. I was just asking for respect in terms of my own time and commitments. I tried to explain again that I wasn't saying no to helping her, but that I needed her to respect my boundaries. I told her that it wasn't healthy for me to always drop everything for her at the last minute, and that I had my own life and plans. She didn't respond to my message for a couple of days, but when she did, it was full of passive-aggressive comments. She told me that it was fine if I didn't want to help her anymore, and that she'd figure it out on her own. She even said that I was acting like I had a family to worry about when I was single with no kids. Since that conversation, I've been feeling guilty. I feel like I might have overreacted. I know being a single mom is incredibly challenging, and I do want to be there for her, but I also feel like I've been taken advantage of. I've spent a lot of my free time babysitting, and the constant last-minute cancellations have made me feel like I can't make plans for myself. I've tried to set boundaries, but it feels like she doesn't respect them. I haven't heard from Lisa much since the argument, and when I have, it's been brief. She's still upset with me, and I'm wondering if I'm being too harsh. I really want to help her, but I also don't want to lose myself in trying to be everything for her. AITA for telling my friend I won't babysit her kids anymore after she keeps canceling plans at the last minute. AITA for refusing to let my brother live with me after he lied about his financial situation. I, 30F, have a younger brother, Nick, 26M, who has always been a bit of a free spirit. Growing up, he was the type of person who would always take the path of least resistance, which sometimes meant not following through on commitments, avoiding responsibility, and leaving problems for others to solve. Our parents have always tried to help him out, but as he got older, they realized he needed to figure things out on his own. I, on the other hand, have always been the responsible one in the family. I have a stable job, a nice apartment, and I've always worked hard to ensure I'm financially secure. Nick's recent situation is where things went south. He called me about 2 months ago and said he was in a tough spot. He had been living in an apartment with some roommates, but they had all gotten into some legal trouble, and as a result, his lease was broken. He told me that he couldn't afford the rent on his own, and he needed to move out immediately. He asked if he could stay with me while he figured things out. At first, I was hesitant because I knew he wasn't exactly the tittiest person, and he had a habit of relying on others to solve his problems. But I agreed to let him stay temporarily. My place is big enough, and I felt like I should help family out when they needed it. Now, I'm all about helping family, but I'm also about setting boundaries. I told Nick that he could stay with me for a month or two at most. I made it clear that he would need to contribute to the household, whether that meant helping with groceries, taking care of chores, or at least covering a portion of the rent. I also asked him to keep things organized and respect my space. For the first few weeks, things were fine. He mostly kept to himself, did a few small things around the house, and everything seemed okay. But then, things started to unravel. Nick started getting more and more comfortable, and I started noticing little things that were getting under my skin. His room became a mess, with clothes and random stuff scattered everywhere. The bathroom was constantly dirty, and I found myself cleaning up after him more than I'd like to admit. I didn't mind doing some extra work here and there, but it started feeling like I was living with a teenager again, not an adult. The breaking point came when I found out Nick had lied to me about his finances. He had told me when he moved in that he had a decent amount of savings and just needed a little time to get back on his feet. I trusted him, but a couple of weeks ago, I overheard him talking to a friend on the phone about how he had barely any money left and was struggling to pay for food and gas. This caught me off guard because he hadn't mentioned any of this to me directly. I confronted him about it, asking if he had been honest with me when he said he was financially stable. He tried to play it off, saying he was just under a little stress and didn't want to burden me. I told him that if he was in financial trouble, he needed to let me know so I could adjust expectations. But he insisted that everything was fine and that I shouldn't worry about it. I felt betrayed, and I started questioning if I'd made a mistake letting him stay with me in the first place. Things got worse when he started freeloading. He stopped offering to contribute to groceries or bills, and instead, he'd ask if he could borrow money here and there for emergencies. I didn't mind helping him out once or twice, but it became a pattern. He'd ask for small amounts of money, claiming he would pay me back soon, but he never did. When I asked him about it, he'd give me some vague excuse or promise that he'd pay me back in a few days. Days turned into weeks, and nothing changed. I finally had enough. After a month of this behavior, I sat him down and told him that I could no longer allow him to stay with me under these circumstances. I told him that I had been more than generous with my space, but it wasn't fair for him to take advantage of me financially or otherwise. I told him he needed to figure out another living arrangement and that he had 1 week to find somewhere else to stay. I even offered to help him find an affordable place, but I made it clear that I couldn't continue to let him live off me. Nick was furious. He accused me of being selfish and unsupportive, claiming that I was throwing him out when he needed me most. He said that I should be willing to help him more and that it was my responsibility as his sister to take care of him, especially when things were tough for him. He said he had no one else to turn to and that I was kicking him while he was down. I explained that I wasn't trying to punish him, but I needed him to take responsibility for his own life. I told him that I didn't mind helping him out temporarily, but that didn't mean I was obligated to let him live with me indefinitely while he refused to take any steps toward financial independence. He ignored my points and kept saying that I was being harsh and that he didn't understand why I was acting this way. He called me cold-hearted and said I was no better than our parents, who he claimed had always expected him to fail. After our argument, Nick left my apartment in a huff. He hasn't spoken to me much since then, and I've heard through other family members that he's been telling them I'm being unreasonable. He's especially upset that I didn't support him during this tough time. Our parents have also been calling me and asking why I couldn't just cut him some slack. They've said that families should be there for each other no matter what, and I shouldn't be so hard on him when he's struggling. I'm starting to feel guilty. I understand that he's going through a difficult time, but I feel like I did what I had to do for my own mental health and stability. I can't keep enabling his behavior, and I don't think I'm in the wrong for asking him to get his act together. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother live with me after he lied about his financial situation. AITA for kicking my friend out of my house after she refused to help with cleaning. I 30F, have a pretty large group of friends, and for the most part, we get along well. One friend, Rachel, 29F, and I have been really close for years. We met in college, and while we've had our ups and downs, I've always considered her a best friend. We share a lot of common interests, from hiking to movie nights, and we often spend time together one-on-one and in group settings. Last month, I had some major renovations done on my house. I had been living in the same place for about 4 years, and while it was comfortable, it needed a bit of a refresh. I had new furniture delivered, and I took the time to redecorate my living room, update the kitchen, and redo the guest room. It was a big project that required a lot of work, but I was excited about the changes. Since I don't have a significant other or any kids, it was a chance for me to really personalize the space and make it my own. When the renovations were finished, I decided to host a little get-together at my house to celebrate. It would be a small, casual evening with a few close friends, good food, and a couple of drinks. Rachel, of course, was one of the first people I invited. I sent out the invitations a couple of weeks in advance, and everyone seemed excited. Rachel has always been someone who enjoys hanging out at my place, and we've had plenty of gatherings over the years. However, I've noticed over the past few months that she's started taking advantage of the fact that I'm the one with the space. She frequently asks if she can come over without much consideration for what's going on in my life. And when she's over, I'm the one who usually ends up doing most of the hosting. I don't mind being a good host, but lately, it had started to feel like a one-sided arrangement. Now, when the day of the housewarming party arrived, I was pretty excited. I'd spent all afternoon preparing, cleaning, cooking, and organizing everything. I'm a type of person who likes to have things spotless, especially when I'm hosting. I made sure everything was in order before my guests arrived. Rachel was one of the first to show up, and while she didn't help with any of the setup, I didn't think too much of it. I thought she'd pitch in later, especially when I saw that the other friends who arrived were offering to help with things like setting out appetizers and drinks. As the night went on, Rachel kept asking if she could help, but then would get distracted by her phone, chatting with other people, or getting involved in conversations that weren't related to the event. It wasn't a huge deal, but it did feel like she was mostly there to enjoy herself without offering much in return. The issue really came up later in the evening when people started to leave. By this time, most of the guests had helped clean up or offered to pitch in. One of my friends even stayed a little longer to help me wipe down the counters and vacuum. I was pretty exhausted by that point, but I didn't mind. It's what you do when you host, right? However, when Rachel stood up to leave, she simply grabbed her purse and made her way to the door without even acknowledging the mess that had been left behind. I was shocked. I tried to keep my cool, but I asked her if she could stay for a few more minutes to help with the cleanup. She looked at me, surprised, and then said, "I'm sure you can handle it, right? I'm really tired." She had been drinking a little throughout the night, but not to the point where she couldn't function. I was taken aback. I tried to remain calm and explained that I wasn't asking for much, just some help with clearing the table and tidying up the living room. She shrugged and said, "It's not like I made the mess. I don't see why I should be responsible for cleaning up." At that point, I felt really hurt. I had gone out of my way to make sure everything was perfect, and I had put in a lot of effort for everyone to enjoy themselves. But when it came time to contribute in even a small way, Rachel was nowhere to be found. I told her, "I'm really disappointed that you aren't willing to help out after all the work I've done to host this event. If you're not willing to pitch in at all, maybe it's better if you go home." Rachel was taken aback and tried to backtrack, saying, "I didn't mean to upset you. I just thought it was your responsibility to clean up." But by this point, I was frustrated. I told her that I wasn't going to beg anyone to help out, and if she wasn't willing to contribute, she could leave. She seemed angry at first, but eventually left without another word. It wasn't until a few hours later that she texted me, apologizing for being rude, but still insisting that I was being overdramatic. She said that I should have just let it go and not made a big deal out of it. She said I was expecting too much of her. I didn't respond right away, but after thinking about it, I realized that the issue wasn't just about the cleanup. It was about the lack of effort and respect for the time and energy I had put into hosting. I feel like Rachel has been taking advantage of my kindness and hospitality for a while, and this was the last straw. I tried to let it go, but when she acted so nonchalant about not helping and didn't seem to understand why I was upset, I realized that I needed to set a boundary. The next day, I had a conversation with her. I told her that I felt hurt and disrespected by her behavior, and that it wasn't just about the cleanup. It was about her attitude toward the effort I put in and how she has consistently been absent when it comes to helping out in any capacity. I told her that I felt like our friendship had been one-sided for a while, and I needed her to show more consideration and effort if we were going to continue being close. Rachel's response was not what I expected. She told me that I was being unreasonable and that she didn't think I should make such a big deal out of something as small as cleaning up after a party. She said that if I wanted her to help, I should have asked her earlier in the evening, and that it wasn't fair to spring it on her at the end of the night. I'm still feeling conflicted. I don't think I overreacted. Hosting a party takes a lot of work, and I don't think it's too much to ask that the people who attend show some appreciation and contribute in small ways. But part of me feels guilty, like maybe I should have let it slide. I'm also wondering if I should have been more direct with her about my expectations beforehand. So, AITA for kicking my friend out of my house after she refused to help with cleaning? AITA for not wanting to take care of my niece and nephew after my sister asked me to? I, 32M, have a sister, Rachel, 35F, who I've always had a pretty good relationship with. We've been through a lot together, and while we don't see each other as often as we used to, we still keep in touch and are generally supportive of one another. Rachel has 2 kids, Emily, 7F, and Noah, 5M, who I love very much. I'm not the kind of guy who's been obsessed with kids, but I genuinely enjoy spending time with them, and I'm always happy to help out when I can. Now, a bit of background. I have a demanding job in the tech industry. I work long hours, often at odd times, and my job is mentally exhausting. I also don't have a partner or kids of my own, so the time I do have outside of work is very precious to me. I've spent the last few years building my career and focusing on my personal life, and while I love my niece and nephew, I just don't have the bandwidth to take on a lot of extra responsibilities. So, here's the situation. A couple weeks ago, Rachel called me out of the blue. I thought she was just checking in, but then she dropped a bombshell. She asked if I could look after Emily and Noah for an entire weekend while she and her husband, Greg, went on a trip to visit some friends. They hadn't been away in years, and she said they really needed a break. At first, I was taken aback, but I tried to be understanding. I told her that I wasn't sure if I could swing it given how busy I was with work, but I'd think about it. I gave it some thought over the next few days. I love Rachel, and I love her kids, but I also value my free time. Watching 2 kids for an entire weekend would mean giving up my entire weekend. I'd have to rearrange my schedule, cancel plans, and commit to being responsible for them 24/7. I realized that, while I'd love to help out, I just wasn't in a position to do it. The last thing I needed was to stretch myself too thin and deal with the stress of taking care of 2 kids while trying to keep up with my work. I ended up calling Rachel back and explained the situation. I told her that I didn't think I could take on that responsibility right now, and that it wasn't because I didn't care about her or her kids, but because I needed to prioritize my own well-being and work commitments. I offered to help in other ways. I could take them for a few hours here and there, or even pick them up from school occasionally if she needed, but a whole weekend was just too much for me. Rachel was incredibly upset. She said I was being selfish and inconsiderate, and that families should help each other out, especially when it came to kids. She told me she was counting on me because she didn't have anyone else to rely on, and that I was being too busy to care about her needs. She even said, "You don't even have kids of your own, so what's the big deal? Why can't you just step up and be there for your family?" This really caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting her to react like that, and I felt guilty. I'm not a parent, so I know I don't fully understand the challenges of raising kids, but I also don't think that should mean I have to put my own life on hold every time someone asks for help. I told her I loved her kids, but I just wasn't in a position to take on that responsibility. I suggested she look into hiring a babysitter or maybe ask some of her other friends or family members for help. But she wasn't having it. She said it was ridiculous that I wouldn't help out when she needed me, and that I was making excuses. Our conversation ended with her telling me she was disappointed in me, and that she would figure something out, but wasn't sure what. I felt really bad about it, but at the same time, I felt like I had done the right thing. I can't be expected to drop everything for someone else's kids just because I'm their uncle. I still care about them and would do anything for them, but I also need to take care of myself. The problem is, ever since that conversation, Rachel has been distant. She hasn't reached out as much, and she hasn't invited me to family gatherings. She's made a couple of comments to mutual family members about how I refused to help her when she really needed it. And now some of our relatives are starting to look at me differently. My parents have even asked me why I didn't just help her out, and they've implied that I should have been more understanding. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not wanting to help, but they just don't seem to get it. Now, I'm feeling torn. I understand that Rachel is probably frustrated and stressed out with her kids and the trip planning, but I also feel like she's being unfair. I'm not her emotional or financial backup, and I can't always be expected to put my life on hold for someone else's convenience. I've tried to help in ways that fit within my capabilities, but I can't be responsible for her entire family, especially when it comes to something as big as a whole weekend of childcare. So, AITA for refusing to take care of my niece and nephew for the weekend, even though my sister asked me to. Edit. Some clarification after reading a lot of the comments. Yes, I offered to help in other ways. I've picked the kids up from school before, taken them out for a few hours, and helped Rachel with smaller tasks when I could. I'm not opposed to helping out, but taking them for an entire weekend would have been too much for me right now. I don't mind spending time with my niece and nephew, and I love them very much. It's just the logistics of a whole weekend that felt overwhelming, especially with how busy my work life is. Rachel and Greg have a lot of other people in their lives who could help out, but I guess they were hoping I'd be the one to step in. She told me it's hard for her to find a reliable sitter who she trusts, but I don't think that should mean it's automatically my responsibility. I don't want to be seen as a bad guy, but I also can't afford to burn myself out trying to be everything for everyone else. AITA for refusing to lend my friend money after she spent all of hers on luxury items. I, 29F, have a friend, Jenna, 28F, who I've known for about 5 years. We met through work, and over time, we developed a strong friendship. Jenna is a very outgoing and charismatic person, and I've always admired her confidence and ability to make people feel welcome. She has a great job in marketing and has always been pretty financially comfortable, though she never flaunted it. I always saw her as someone who was responsible with her money and made good decisions. But recently, things have started to change. Last year, Jenna started a relationship with Alex, 30M, a guy she met through mutual friends. They seem to be happy together, and things moved pretty quickly. Alex is a nice guy, but he's also a bit of a spender. At first, I didn't think much of it, as they were just enjoying their time together. But over the past few months, I started to notice a shift in Jenna's behavior. She began buying a lot of expensive items, designer clothes, luxury handbags, high-end shoes, and even things like jewelry. I was a bit surprised, as I knew she had never been the type to spend that much on material things. She would often post about her new purchases on social media. And while I'm not one to judge anyone for their choices, I couldn't help but notice that she was acquiring a lot of expensive items at once. At first, I chalked it up to her simply treating herself. We all deserve to splurge every now and then, right? But it didn't stop. Jenna started talking about how she and Alex were planning trips to places like Paris and Milan to shop for more designer items. She mentioned how they were staying in 5-star hotels and dining at exclusive restaurants, and that she was living her best life. Again, I didn't want to judge her. I understood that people have different priorities when it comes to spending money. Still, it seemed like she was constantly spending beyond her means. A few months ago, I started to get concerned when Jenna texted me asking if I could lend her some money. At first, I thought it was for something like rent or an emergency, but when I asked her why she needed the money, she explained that she had spent too much on her credit cards and was struggling to pay off the bills. She didn't go into much detail, but she mentioned that she had made some large purchases recently and hadn't been able to keep up with the payments. She said she had fallen behind and needed to make a payment to avoid late fees. I was taken aback, as it didn't seem like she was living paycheck to paycheck or struggling financially. In fact, from what I could tell, she had been living a pretty lavish lifestyle recently. I asked her what the exact amount was, and she told me it was around $2,000. I was hesitant at first, but told her I need to think about it. I'm not wealthy by any means, but I'm in a stable financial position. I've always tried to be responsible with my money, and lending large amounts of it makes me nervous. I'm not the kind of person who has an extra $2,000 lying around to just give away, especially when I don't know how she got herself into this situation. So, I asked her how she had gotten into so much debt in the first place. Jenna hesitated before answering and finally admitted that she had been living beyond her means. She said she had been buying expensive clothes and accessories to keep up with the lifestyle she had gotten used to since being with Alex. She explained that they had been going on trips, dining out at fancy places, and living like they were wealthy, even though her credit cards were maxed out. She said it wasn't a huge deal, though, because she just needed some time to get back on track. I felt uneasy hearing this. I understand that sometimes people get carried away, but it seemed like she wasn't taking responsibility for her own choices. I'm all for treating yourself, but living in excess and putting everything on credit without any plan to pay it back seemed reckless to me. I also felt like she was looking for a quick fix rather than addressing the root of the issue. I told her that I couldn't lend her that much money. I explained that I didn't feel comfortable giving her such a large sum, especially considering the fact that she had put herself in that situation through her own choices. I also mentioned that I wasn't sure how I'd feel about lending her money, given that it seemed like her spending habits weren't changing. I told her that I could help her find ways to budget or talk to a financial advisor, but I couldn't give her money to solve a problem that was caused by her own behavior. Jenna didn't take it well. She responded with a long text saying that she was disappointed in me and that I wasn't being a true friend. She said that friends are supposed to help each other in times of need, and that it wasn't like I was going to miss $2,000. She also accused me of judging her for her spending habits and told me that I wouldn't understand because I wasn't living life the way she was. She said that she had been there for me during tough times, and now I was turning my back on her when she needed help. I was hurt by her reaction. I'd always been there for her in the past, and I've helped her through difficult situations before. I understand that asking for financial help can be awkward, but I don't think I should be expected to lend money to someone who isn't willing to address the underlying issues causing their financial problems. I didn't feel like I was turning my back on her. I just didn't think giving her money would solve anything. I also felt like she wasn't taking responsibility for her own actions, and that bothered me. After that conversation, Jenna hasn't reached out to me much. When we do talk, the subject of money is avoided, and there's an awkward tension between us. We've always been close, but now I'm unsure if I made the right decision. Part of me feels like I was justified in refusing to lend her money because she wasn't being responsible with her finances. But another part of me wonders if I should have just helped her out, especially since she was asking for my support during a difficult time. So, AITA for refusing to lend my friend money after she spent all of hers on luxury items? AITA for refusing to let my friend move into my apartment, even though she's in a bad situation? I, 28F, have a good friend, Sarah, 27F, who I've known for almost 10 years. We've been through a lot together. High school drama, college struggles, and a whole bunch of life challenges that have come with being in your 20s. Over the years, we've always been there for each other, but our friendship hasn't always been easy. Sarah tends to make impulsive decisions, and while she's generally a kind and generous person, she's also someone who often finds herself in bad situations, whether it's with her relationships, jobs, or finances. Recently, things took a turn for the worse in Sarah's life. She broke up with her boyfriend of 3 years, Chris, 29M, after finding out he had been cheating on her. Understandably, she was devastated. The breakup hit her hard, and I've been there to support her through the emotional fallout. But then, things started spiraling. Sarah found out she couldn't afford the rent on her own in the apartment she shared with Chris, and she wasn't able to make ends meet. She was left with very few options, and after a few weeks of couch surfing with other friends, she reached out to me. One night, I got a call from her. She was crying on the phone, telling me she had nowhere to go and that she needed a place to stay. She explained that she was looking for a new place, but that the rent in the city was so high and she couldn't afford anything on her own. She begged me to let her stay with me, saying she didn't want to move back in with her parents because that would feel like a step backward. She also said she'd be able to pay me rent after a few weeks once she found a job and got settled. I've always been supportive of her, but I was torn. I live in a small apartment by myself, and I value my personal space. I like living alone because it allows me to have peace and quiet, especially after a long day of work. I also have a pretty strict routine, and I wasn't sure how it would affect me to have someone else living with me for an extended period of time. I told her I needed time to think about it. After a lot of back and forth in my head, I decided that I could let her stay for a few weeks just to help her out in a tough spot. I wasn't comfortable with the idea of having her move in long term, but I thought a short stay would give her time to get her feet under her and figure out her next steps. We talked about it, and she agreed to take it 1 week at a time. For the first couple of weeks, things seemed okay. Sarah tried to respect my space, and we mostly kept to our own areas of the apartment. She offered to help out with groceries and other household expenses, which I appreciated, but it still wasn't ideal. I could tell she was stressed, and that affected her mood at times. I tried my best to be understanding, but the longer she stayed, the more I felt the pressure of having someone else in my home. Things started getting more complicated when Sarah didn't start actively looking for jobs like she said she would. Instead of spending time on job applications, she seemed to be spending hours on the phone with her ex, Chris, trying to figure out what went wrong in their relationship and whether or not they could get back together. It frustrated me because I felt like she was wasting time when she could be focusing on her future and getting her life back on track. I tried to be gentle when I brought it up, telling her that I felt like she needed to focus more on her own goals instead of staying emotionally attached to someone who had hurt her. She got defensive and said that it was her decision to figure things out with Chris and that I should respect that. I told her I would, but I also reminded her that I couldn't be her therapist. That conversation ended on a tense note, but I hoped things would improve. As the weeks passed, Sarah started to make herself more comfortable in my space, and I began to feel overwhelmed. She would leave her things around the apartment, and it felt like there was no boundary between my personal space and hers anymore. I found her clothes in my bathroom, dishes piling up in the sink, and she'd leave her stuff on the couch while I was trying to relax after a long day. The tension built up, and I started feeling like I had no privacy anymore. I felt like I was living with a roommate, not a guest. One day, I came home from work to find that she had invited her friend, Emma, over without asking me first. They were in the living room, drinking wine and laughing, and it felt like my apartment was being taken over. I was caught off guard and felt uncomfortable. I told Sarah that I needed her to give me a heads up if she was going to have someone over, and she seemed annoyed that I was making a big deal out of it. She said I was being unreasonable and that I needed to lighten up because she was going through a hard time. After that, things got worse. Sarah began staying out later and later with friends, leaving me with the responsibility of taking care of the apartment. I was finding it hard to keep up with cleaning, cooking, and just maintaining my routine while also trying to accommodate her. I started feeling resentful, and I realized that I didn't want this arrangement to continue. I had made a mistake by agreeing to let her stay longer than I originally planned, and I knew I needed to set some boundaries. I had another talk with Sarah, telling her that it was time for her to find her own place. I explained that while I wanted to help, I couldn't keep living like this, and I needed my space back. I told her that I had been feeling overwhelmed by the situation, and I couldn't keep sacrificing my own comfort for her to get back on her feet. I also reminded her that she had promised to contribute to the rent after a few weeks, but she hadn't yet made any effort to do so. Sarah was furious. She accused me of being selfish and said that I was kicking her out when she needed me the most. She said she didn't have anywhere else to go and that I should have been more supportive. I tried to explain that I had been supportive for as long as I could, but she wasn't hearing it. She called me a bad friend and said that I had abandoned her in her time of need. Now, Sarah's barely talking to me, and I'm feeling guilty. I know I did what was best for me, but I hate that it ended up causing so much tension. I feel like I've been a bad friend, but at the same time, I know I can't keep living in a way that makes me miserable. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend move into my apartment, even though she's in a bad situation. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.